It's a 1928 Martin 018KH, so don't tell me it was a burst.
Oh yeah, it was. He also had a gold top.
What famous guitars or what rare guitars are your favorites that you
Oh
buy?
my God. Are you ready for this?
Okay, I know. So everybody, welcome to another edition of Cars, Guitars, Bourbon, and Barbecue. And we are very pleased this episode to have Neil Harpe with us. Neil is a native Annapolitan, a friend of our shop. Neil and I have known each other for probably close to 30 years now.
At least.
At least. And Neil is a noted printmaker and artist and also guitar, somewhat historian. With the Stella background.
I used to call myself a guitarcheologist.
Good. Great term. Great term. So Neil's written a book on Stella guitars, which is the de facto reference for people that are interested in Stella guitars.
Yep.
And Neil's daughter Erin is also a noted blues musician in her own right with her husband Jim.
Yeah.
And made a lot of success and got a lot of awards behind them. So
Yep.
we're just going to do a little talking today about things that are of interest to. First of all, let's just kind of touch on the book a little bit. When did you write this, Neil?
Started writing it back in about 2003,
Okay.
and for the first 100 or so copies, they were just spiral bound, and I printed them on my computer printer.
Wow.
And so this is like the fifth printing, and it's got more pictures and more information. It's changed a little with time.
Tons of color photos. A great real reference tool for anybody that's interested in collecting or buying or selling these, authenticating these guitars. Tell us just a little briefly about the history of Stella.
Well, for one thing, the first time I ever heard of a Stella guitar was the guitar that I rented from Bikini's music store here in Annapolis.
Oh, wow.
And it was a piece of junk. It was just impossible to keep in tune, and even if you had it in tune, you couldn't play it because the strings were so far off of the fingerboard.
Wow.
So my first experience was Stella's, cheapo, no.
Right.
But then I was looking in an encyclopedia, but when I started getting interested in folk music back when I was, I guess, in like 10th grade in high school, got more and more into the old blues music and
Right.
looking at pictures in various books. These guys were all playing these very similar 12 fret guitars, fairly small body, and most of them were Stellas.
Where's Stella from?
Well, Stella means star in Latin, I think, but it all the Stella guitars made before 1930. I mean, up until 1938, were made in Jersey City.
Oh, wow.
And when the company finally went out of business, they sold the name of Stella to Harmony, and Harmony continued making guitars under the Stella name. Yeah, Chicago. Also, Sovereign was another of their brand names. So before 1938, they were making guitars named Sovereign. After 1938, Harmony was making Harmony Sovereign guitars.
So let's go back for a second. You're a native Annapolitan. You grew up here. You went to school here, Annapolis High School, I assume.
Right.
And you became interested in blues in the early 60s, and you said there was kind of a community of players that were around. Max Oakes, you mentioned.
Max and Leland Talbot and their cohorts, mostly from Maryland, D.C. area, some of them from New York. And they all were into looking for old 78 RPM records. And they all were either music enthusiasts like Leland, or they were into playing guitars like Max and Firk, the guy that we called Backward Sam Firk. His real name is Mike Stewart. And Fang, another guy, Tom Hoskins, who later was the guy that went down to Mississippi and found Mississippi John Hurt alive and brought him back to D.C.
Wow. No, he was the one who was telling me about went to the Newport Festival?
Yeah. My mechanic Bill Tidings, who passed away a few years ago. Great mechanic, and didn't play any music, but another person that was thoroughly into the old blues. And he drove a International Harvesters, what they'd call a sports utility vehicle nowadays, up to the Newport Folk Festival in 1964. And in the car was Mississippi John Hurt and his wife and Skip James.
Wow.
If they had had an accident and got killed, the blues would have been dead.
Wow. So now, the Annapolis scene was important. What about D.C. and Baltimore? Were you a part of that at all in the day?
Yeah, I mean, when I moved over to PG County, I got involved with like Cephas and Wiggins and John Jackson and Eleanor Ellis and Flora Moulton and that whole D.C. crowd. So.
I've heard from other...
and Archie Edwards was a real good friend of mine.
I've heard from other historians in Annapolis, has sort of always been a center for music, going back to revolutionary times, that there's been some sort of live music, or obviously live music, but a music scene, if you will.
Yeah. A lot of that, in my day, was centered around St. John's College, because there were a lot of people that were guitar players and jazz piano players and whatnot. So I hung around there, even though I didn't go to St. John's. I went to the Corcoran in D.C. Part of the time that I was going to the Corcoran, I was living at home and taking the bus over to D.C. That's another story. But I played in a jug band with a bunch of St. Johnnies, and as a matter of fact, somebody stopped me on the street. I was walking down Maryland Avenue and said, "Hey, you got to get over to St. John's. Son House is going to be doing a concert in the Great Hall."
Wow.
It hadn't been announced or anything. It just happened. He was coming through town, and he knew somebody at St. John's, and they said, "Hey, why don't you do it?"
It was a pop-up.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Wow.
I sat like as far away from him as I am to the camera right now.
Wow. Exciting. So, tell me a little bit about what you know about the blues music scene in, say, D.C. back in the 60s, and sort of the folky blues scene.
Well, there weren't a lot of places to perform in Annapolis, so D.C. was the place to go, and like Ontario Place was where John Hurt used to perform, and I don't know, Madam's Madam's
Organ's still around, right?
Yeah, there were places like that had open mics.
Child Herald, yeah. Up on the Gentry, in Capitol Hill.
You know them better than me.
Well,
I know all those names, but I can't bring them forth.
I came along. I moved from Richmond to D.C. in '80.
Oh, okay.
And I met Cesar Diaz, and Cesar, of course, was he kind of injected the whole vintage guitar thing in my arm, and I'd go to the blues jams there. But I got to know quite a lot of those clubs, and then we moved out here. I just missed Charlie's West Side, which was a real seminal venue in Annapolis. But tell me about your specific love of guitars, and in specific, what famous guitars or what rare guitars are your favorites that you own?
Oh my God, are you ready for this?
Okay, I know. This might be another episode.
I've been a catch and release guitar collector all my life. So you name it, and I've probably had it.
Okay.
I've got photographs of my daughter Erin when she was about 12, playing a double-aught 45 Martin.
Wow.
I traded
pre-war.
1929.
Oh my gosh.
I traded a Nick Lucas for a double-aught 42, and that wasn't even that many years ago, maybe 25 years ago. It was one of so many Nick Lucases that I've had over the years that it was like, oh, I have a chance to get something different.
Wow.
A double-aught 42.
Oh my gosh.
So,
what would you say, like your top five? I mean, you've owned several Nick Lucases.
I would say that the Nick Lucases that I've had have all been good, and they've all been different, and they've all been my favorites. Way over any Martin that I've had. I mean, my Martin, the first Martin I ever had was a 1935 D18 when I was in high school. Yeah. Again,
Don't tell me it had a shaded top.
no, that one didn't. That one didn't.
I would really be sad.
But I did have a shaded top Roy Smeck Radio Grand,
Wow.
and I had which usually they're natural top. I had several other Roy Smecks. They're really wonderful guitars too, but the neck is quite wide, and it's a shame to cut them down to make them more like a regular
Not
guitar.
that guitar.
So I don't abide by like people butchering or modifying. Well, excuse the word butchering, but modifying like ladder brace guitars to make them into something that they never were intended to be. And I've seen so much of that.
Well, probably maybe the exception is converting these Hawaiian style guitars over to a Spanish style.
Well, that doesn't bother me. I don't think that because you're not doing that much different to it. Like a Roy Smeck Stage Deluxe, some of them had frets, some of them had flush frets.
Right.
And to fret one to make it playable as a regular guitar, since it doesn't have a square neck anyway, doesn't bother me that much.
Right.
So.
Right. Now, you've obviously had Roy Smecks, and you've had the Nick Lucas, and some shade top other stuff. What would you say was your favorite Martin that you had? Is that too tough?
I think it was probably that. It's really hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I had an 016 New York that I thought was a exceptional guitar, and it was only like 1960s.
Right.
And so,
right.
And then I had, but you've been around in guitars enough to know you get some dogs. I had a 1936 J35 that was a dog. It just didn't sound like anything, and it was almost mint.
Maybe that's the reason.
Yeah.
If it was a dog, nobody wanted to play it.
So so I let it go. That one probably wouldn't have been in my house even a month.
What about electrics? You mentioned that was there was a time after you began to play that you wanted.
Oh yeah.
You wanted to. I mean, that was the time, right? Everybody wanted to have a band, or they wanted to sort of make the transition over to electric instruments.
Yeah, when I was in junior high school, and when I was just taking guitar lessons with Mr. Barlag at Keeney's Music Store, man, I wanted the guitars that he brought. Every week he'd have something different. I mean, sometimes it'd be like a Super 400 or an L5, but
wow.
He also came in with his Les Paul Standard.
Don't tell me it was a Burst.
Oh yeah, it was. He also had a gold top.
Oh my God!
He had some wonderful guitars. And
there have been. I know through the years there have been more than a few Les Paul standards that have come out of Annapolis.
Yeah.
We got one in our old store in Arnold. I was over in Culpeper, Virginia, buying a '58 Strat, and I got a call when I got there that there was a guy in the store with a 1960, and I rushed home and bought it.
Yeah.
And there's one other one that's come from here that when we were over on Jennifer Road, the guy walked it in, also a 60. And then I know for a fact there have been a few, at least 3 more that have come out of Annapolis. So, of course, extraordinary guitars, extraordinarily expensive now.
I wonder if they came from Keeney's Music Store, because that was the
Gibson
place. Yeah. When I was in college, in spite of the fact that I had already been struck by the great folk music scare of the 60s, I was enticed by the Rolling Stones, perhaps, and Muddy Waters, and other people that were using electric guitars. So when I was going to American University before I transferred to the Corcoran, went downtown to what is the store in Wheaton?
Chuck Levin's.
Chuck Levin, when he was down in Anacostia.
Oh, he's in Anacostia.
Yeah, before the riots.
Oh yeah.
And I bought a Gretsch Duojet, And that was because Bo Diddley played that's Garrett's duo jack, and that was a neat guitar. That was a really cool guitar. While I left it at home, went back to college, and my brother was trying to adjust the truss rod because he knew nothing about it whatsoever, and he should never have even touched it. And he snapped the truss rod. So that was that.
When I was a kid in Richmond, in elementary school, our field trip was to come to the nation's capital, and of course they'd rent a bus, and your mom would pack you a little sack lunch, and we were creeping down. Where was Chuck's downtown? It was on 12th Street? Or
it was down, I think, 11th Street.
11th
I'm not
Street.
sure. It was down in the Anacostia area, though.
So this is elementary school for me, and I'm kind of creeping down the road in the bus because the traffic's not moving. I remember looking out the window and like, here's Chuck's, and just being fascinated by the instruments that were in the window then.
Oh, yeah.
I guess that was before the riots.
It was.
Yeah, in '68.
Oh, they had some great guitars, and this was, of course, a used one. The Duojut was about a 56, something like that.
George Harrison.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what Harrison used.
And then once my brother ruined it, I should have kept it because you could probably easily repair it nowadays. But back then, that was like the death knell of a guitar. The next guitar I had to play electric blues was a Jazzmaster.
Oh yeah,
and that was a early Jazzmaster. So it was a pre CBS
takeover. Yeah,
and that was a nice guitar. And it got stolen when I was at AU.
Oh crap.
Yeah.
So you graduated from Corcoran, or you went to AU?
Yeah. I went to AU and transferred to the Corcoran.
American University.
And graduated from the Corcoran in '69. And
what's your degree from in Corcoran?
They didn't give a degree back then. They gave a 4-year diploma. So I had to go to MICA in Baltimore to get a bachelor's. So I had to do another year to get a BFA, and then finally I went to GW for an MFA.
Wow.
So glutton for punishment.
You now teach. You still doing the class at Maryland Hall in printmaking?
No.
You were doing that for a few years.
No.
Kind of COVID shut that down?
Yeah, I moved it all out of there. Sold one of the presses, and I have the other press in my studio.
Have you done other sort of educational things?
Oh yeah. I taught at Nova in Northern Virginia Community College for 7 years.
Okay.
And I taught at the Corcoran for 1 year, and I taught at University College at University of Maryland for a year.
Wow. So you've always lived in this area?
Oh yeah.
Never moved out?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So let's talk about some of the guitars that we brought up today, and maybe you want to play a couple of them. This is a Koa Martin. Can you grab it?
Oh, it's a lovely guitar too. I want it.
Okay, we'll talk. It's a 1928 Martin 018 KH. So Neil, this was originally a Hawaiian style guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So really meant for I guess Hawaiian style slide playing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we got it, we converted it over to Spanish style.
Yeah.
Taras did retain the original bar frets, or we have a stock of those, so we refret it with bar frets. So this is a Hawaiian koa, which is a type of mahogany from Hawaii.
Yeah.
And pretty fabulous little guitar.
Beautiful guitar, and he also compensated the saddle.
He did.
So those are the big differences that. Lighter strings.
Nice. So you mentioned lighter strings. You had a couple of health issues a few years back, right?
Yeah, I almost Well,
I'm gonna trade
it almost looked like I wasn't going to play the guitar at all because I had a stroke and lost the use of my left hand.
And you sold us
Sold a bunch of my guitars.
sold a couple of guitars to us in that
Yep.
period. So we kind of, thankfully, you were able to regain the skill to play guitars and the use of your left hand.
Yeah,
And that says a lot about perseverance. And
yeah. I don't have a strength yet, but I'm getting most of the
dexterity.
back.
Right. So we're moving up a couple of years. Now, we mentioned this guitar is pre-30s. This guitar was built in the 30s by National. These were made in Los Angeles back in the day. And
Yeah.
really, the Nationals and other resonator instruments are known for being blues instruments. So
Yep. This is what, a Style-O?
that one is a Style-O. It's a 14 fretter.
Yep.
This is very similar to the guitar that Dire Straits had on the cover of their record Soldier's Wing.
And it's a 14 fretter, which is very rare.
You said Aaron had one.
Erin has one.
Nice.
Oh, she has every guitar that she's ever owned.
She's
Unlike
not
an
like
old
Dad.
man, I'm a catch and release, and she is a catch and keep.
I'm keeping that line, by the way. That describes me perfectly.
Anyways, yeah, she's still got it. It's the what I call the typewriter finish
Right.
on it. So it's totally different looking guitar, but it's the same body shape, unbound fingerboard.
Right.
It's kind of a bare bones version of this guitar.
Right. This is the Style 1. Oh, no, excuse me. This is the O. We also have, from 1932, behind you is a tricone.
Oh, my, yes.
Tricone Style 1. A little fancier instrument.
Yeah, this is a guitar that Memphis Minnie played.
Oh, yeah.
She and Kansas Joe both had this model.
Tricones.
Has a different sound altogether from that. It's much more subtle.
Very
This
nice.
is a in-your-face guitar for really serious blues.
Right.
This is a guitar that, at least originally, was something that the Hawaiian guitars, the real Hawaiian musicians from Hawaii played.
Right. Well, to me, I if these guitars could talk, I always have this feeling about an instrument. Where was it? Where was it used? How was it played? But you have to think these guitars came around the Depression era,
Oh yeah,
and they must have been a fortune to buy them new.
they were, and they were the only thing you could get that would be loud enough to
compete.
with a crowd in a bar.
Right.
Tampa Red played one of these too.
Right.
So a lot of the blues guys played these 3-cone guitars, but
With
if they could afford them, like Tampa Red made a lot of money. He was a very successful musician, and he had one that was custom made with his name on it and everything else.
This guitar I just bought out in Colorado only a few weeks ago, and I bought it from the original owner's nephew.
Wow, really?
And she had bought it brand new, and either brought it out to Colorado when they moved out there or bought it there. I didn't get that far with the story, but Taras repaired the binding on this side. The binding was missing, and it's just a wonderful instrument.
It's a treasure.
The original case.
Wow.
Great guitar. And again, I have to wonder about the people that were able to afford these and own them and actually keep them. My own grandfather really struggled during the Depression and lost his grocery store, and you wonder about the instruments themselves and did people make their living? It's just.
I think that most of the people that bought these things either were people that had some means or people that played music for a living and wanted something that was durable and loud.
Mm-hmm.
And you play in a juke joint full of half-drunk people dancing all over the place, and you've got a guitar that not only is indestructible, but it make a good weapon if you had to use it.
Well, that part hasn't changed. Playing in front of drunks and rowdy bar. Yeah.
But for the same reason, a lot of the musicians bought cheap Stellas, though, because they were expendable.
Right.
Instead of getting something that was indestructible, they got guitars that, if it got broken, so what? You go down the street and buy another one.
Right. So what is your website, Neil?
It's www.stellaguitars.com.
So that's www.stellaguitars.com.
Correct.
All right. And of course, we sell your books here, and we'll put the web address up for where you can buy them. It's funny you mentioned that these guitars being sold in dozens or lots of 12, and that most anybody could become a dealer back in the day. And I've been traveling the country for 40 years looking for guitars. Back in the day, I remember going into an appliance store down in like Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, and here's Martin's.
Yeah.
Hanging on the wall, like they were a Martin dealer, but they also sold Frigidaire.
Yeah.
So
it was very common back in the 1920s and 30s to see somebody that was selling records and was also selling Stellas.
Right. And
it wasn't a record store.
And pawn shops were notorious in the South for also being music stores. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I remember talking to Bill Carson, who was the guy Leo Fender allegedly built the Stratocaster for and with his advice. And Bill also worked for Fender for years and was a sales rep. And I would talk to him about the store I used to go into in Richmond as a kid. My dad would take us to the barber college because it's the cheapest place to get a haircut. Mm-hmm. And right across the street there was a pawn shop, and there was this old dude that had a finger missing, and he had a sidearm, and you'd walk in, and I remember seeing all these like red and blue Stratocasters and Jazzmasters and Jaguars. Like, those are kind of cool. He goes, yeah, they don't sell though.
Oh, no kidding.
And now,
funny.
And I mentioned that to Bill Carson years later, and he was one of his stores. He goes, yeah, that guy was a tough guy. So I can't remember. I think his name was Red or something. I'll look it up.
Well, pawn shops are great places to get guitars and always have been.
They can be.
Baltimore used to have a lot of them, and I remember going up there with Gary Burnett, and we went from one pawn shop to the next.
Wow.
And you never know. There was a D'Angelico up on way up high in one of those stores.
And back in the day, it was Ted's music in Baltimore.
Oh, that was a treasure trove.
Right? I remember going in there and going, wow.
Ferk used to go up there, Mike Stewart, and find guitars by just rooting around. And it was like a junk store. It was like you couldn't walk in straight. You had to turn sideways to go down the aisles because there was so much stuff.
Astor's music in Richmond was like that. There were just walls and miles and miles and miles of Dan Electro, and there was miles and miles of Epiphones, and just everything you could think of. You could rent a PA in there, you could buy picks, you could buy whatever, a Gibson, but it was like the same thing. And they priced their stuff so that they didn't sell it. Yeah. So it hung on the wall for years.
Yeah.
So same story when that place went down. Steve Malkasethian, I think, and Lindy Fralin went in there and cleaned it out years ago.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Ted's?
No, this is Astor's in Richmond.
Same thing happened to Ted's. I don't know who did it, but and of course Holtzaffel, who made 12-string guitars in Baltimore, when they closed down, they had so much incomplete instruments, things that had never been built, mm-hmm. tops, already bent sides, and you would all kinds of stuff. I think that Fred. Up in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah. Fred Oster.
I think Fred Oster ended up with some of that stuff. But I wrote an article for Fretboard Journal about Holtzaffel guitars.
Well, so. What other Maryland makers were there? It's Microfrets, obviously, but were there other Maryland makers besides Paul?
Well, Koob Veneman had his own brand.
That's right, made in Japan.
I think that they were made in Japan, or they were partly made in Japan and partly assembled here. Right.
I remember that. Let's move on over to this guy, which is I grabbed the wrong one. Which is a 1942 0021.
Oh yeah.
And
lovely.
Of course, pre-war Martins are revered. That's kind of one of the bucket list things that or serious players want to have a pre-war Martin. This one, of course, is the smaller body style. It's the 00 size. It's the 21, so it has a rosewood back and sides.
Yep.
Just a very nice little
Dark
small
binding.
So this is a 42. It's highly likely that they were starting to incorporate women in the Martin factory about that time. And
Oh yeah, just as same as Gibson. I
same as
guess.
Gibson.
Okay.
The men went off to war, and the women were filled in to build the guitars. And I've heard a lot of people, and it's a common theory that these guitars that were built by the Kalamazoo girls and the women that worked at Martin in the day are some of the finest instruments that were made.
Well, I don't doubt it, because this certainly is a fine example. I had one that was a few years older than this, but it had ebony binding instead of the tortoise. But aside from that, and of course it had a shaded top.
I
know.
And I just sold one foolishly, and I really wrestled with whether or not I was. But I'm a catch and release guy like you are.
Yeah,
and that's always
well,
happened.
you have to.
I had a nice collection when I started. When I first started, before I opened my store in Arnold in '91, I had a big collection, and I sold it and bought a beautiful home in Arnold down on Chase Creek. And after that, it kind of got the business mentality. But what I was getting at is recently I bought a 36 D18 shade top that had never had a brace touched, a bridge plate, a bridge, anything. It was just that guitar. And it sounded amazing and looked amazing. And of course it went for, a lot of money.
So you're going to break my heart by saying you don't have it anymore.
No, I sold it.
I
know where it is.
Okay.
But he getting it out of his hands.
Well, a long time ago, I got over that. If I had today all the guitars that I had, I'd be living a palatial life.
Right.
But for me, it was like each one was going to bring me the next one. I couldn't keep them both, so I traded a Nick Lucas for a double aught 42. I wanted the double aught 42. I'd already had the Nick Lucas.
Right.
We'd been friends for maybe a year.
Right.
And I'd had 4 or 5 before that one. So I've had 12 Nick Lucases, by the way.
Wow, that's amazing. How many were there?
Oh, well, they made hundreds of them. I mean, they made them, and they
didn't make them in the thousands, though, did they?
No, but
less than 1,000 made.
I've got the figures somewhere at home, but they made a few each year since I think they started in 1927. Roy Bookbinder has the 27. The last one I had was a 1927. I sold it to him, and he also bought 2 or 3 others because he's a Nick Lucas guy too. And I've had every iteration of the Nick Lucas, the 12 fret, 13 fret, 14 fret, tailpiece, fixed bridge, maple, rosewood, and mahogany.
Wow.
So I've done the whole gamut of Nick Lucas guitars.
Well, we were talking a minute ago about the catch and release aspect of this. People ask me, how do you sell these guitars? I've owned 11 50s Les Paul Sunbursts.
Yeah.
I've owned everything I've ever wanted twice or 3 times or 5 times. But for me, obviously I'm extremely fortunate because I get to do this as a business.
Yeah.
So there's the thrill of the hunt and going out and looking for things. I told my mother-in-law the other day, my best days of the day, I'm leaving to go out on a guitar safari, and the best days of the day, I'm coming home from a guitar
I never
safari.
did that. I did the same thing you did. For 15 years, I was an online dealer of mostly Stellas.
Right.
And what it did is it made it possible for me to get my hands on just about every model Stella that was ever made.
Right.
12 string, 6 string, 7 string, 10 string. From the bottom of the line all the way up to the top of the line.
Wow.
And someday I'm going to sit down and count the pictures of the various guitars. I'm sure that there must have been at least 500 or more that passed through my hands. And
we'd love to post those. If you can, we'd love to post those.
I'd be happy to let you share the pictures that I've taken over the years. So I started off with taking them with a Niker mat, And then I finally got a digital camera.
Right. So yeah, the joy for me is hunting these guitars, but there's also a real joy for me in being a custodian and owning the instruments long enough that we can send them down the road in better condition for the next generation of people to enjoy. There's a joy in that, and there's real joy for me in placing these wonderful instruments in great players' hands.
My feeling exactly, and that's what it's all about. I think it's what it always has been. The one thing that I always try to stress, though, is to never really seriously modify these instruments. I remember when I was a young bluegrass fan back in high school. I used to be in bluegrass as well as blues. I got into banjos, and so many people
five strings conversions
converted these beautiful old Gibson tenors and plectrums into 5-string banjos, and they trashed the necks so that you could never go back.
Right.
They would pick all the inlays out of the fingerboard, and
why didn't they just build a whole new neck?
Well, some of them did, but a lot of them didn't, and the necks got sold separately from the bodies, and
to restore something else.
So they destroyed a whole genre of music that was popular at one time, and it's coming back now.
Right.
And people are now looking for the still remaining, and there are plenty of them, of course, because they made so many tenors back then. But so many tenors got trashed or got modified, got converted, and it just bothers me when people convert.
We have a tenor master tone downstairs that we just got.
Oh, wow.
I haven't even put it up on the site yet. I just got it.
Yeah, I was listening to a group that calls themselves Tuba Skinny. They play this traditional New Orleans stuff, and they've got somebody that's really a good tenor banjo player, and there's another guy that plays an archtop guitar, and there's a gal that plays trumpet, just knocks your socks off.
Wow.
And they're just really amazing, and it's so good to see people actually using these instruments again.
When is Erin playing down here again? Do you know?
She's just getting back into gigging again because things got good for a short period of time, and then they
shut down again.
Yeah. But she's doing some things up in Vermont. I think she's playing the ski circuit.
Is she ErinHarpe.com?
Yeah.
ErinHarpe.com.
Yeah.
Erin Harpe.
Yeah. She might even admit that I taught her most everything she knows.
Maybe.
Well, she grew up around it, though. I mean, she was very influenced by Eleanor Ellis, who was a very good friend of ours, and another person to look out for, Eleanor. She's amazing. One of those people from the D.C. area that's still out playing music.
Well, Neil, we're running out of time here. I want to thank you for coming in and talking to us today. You and I have known each other for a long time, and I know you've been an amazing resource and been around these instruments and this kind of music for a long time. And I've always admired, your artwork. I own some of your art, and we really appreciate you being in. And once again, it's StellaGuitars.com, STELLA Guitars plural.com, and ErinHarpe.com, ErinHarpe.com. And thank you guys for tuning in to Cars, Guitars, Bourbon, and Barbecue with our friend Neil Harpe.
Where's the bourbon?
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.